They were not warriors. They had never been warriors. Their bodies were soft and thin, covered in smooth blue skin that glowed faintly in the dark. They had large eyes that could see beauty in everything. They had long fingers that could create art and music that made other species weep with joy. But they had no claws, no fangs, no armor. Evolution had been kind to them because their world had been kind to them. Prime was a paradise. The gravity was gentle. The weather was always mild. The plants grew tall and gave fruit all year long. There were no large predators, no poison, no danger. For 10,000 years they had lived in peace. They built great cities of crystal and light. They wrote poetry. They studied the stars. They believed that all intelligent life must be peaceful because why would anyone choose violence when the universe was so beautiful? They were wrong. The Dominion came on a Tuesday. Elder was tending to the flowers in the Garden of Ancestors when the sky turned dark. At first, thought it was a cloud, then looked up and saw the ships, hundreds of them, thousands of them. They blocked out the sun like a swarm of insects, and they were descending toward the cities below. They were everything they were not. They were large, armored creatures with hard shells and sharp limbs. They had evolved on a harsh world where only the strong survived. They had built an empire by conquering others, taking what they wanted, destroying what they did not need. They had no word for mercy in their language. The invasion lasted 3 hours. They had no military. They had no weapons. They had police officers who carried small stun devices for dealing with the occasional dispute, but these did nothing against armor. They tried to talk. They tried to negotiate. They offered gifts. They offered friendship. They offered everything they had. They took everything anyway. Watched from the garden as the capital city burned. The great libraries that held 1,000,000 years of knowledge were destroyed. The hospitals were bombed. The schools were leveled. And the soldiers marched through the streets, killing anyone who ran, capturing anyone who surrendered. The screaming lasted for days. By the end of the first week, 90% of the population was dead or captured. The survivors hid in caves, in ruins, in any dark place they could find. As the last surviving member of the High Council, became the leader of what remained of the people. It was not a position wanted. It was not a position anyone wanted, but someone had to make the hard choices. And made the hardest choice of all. Deep beneath the ruins of the Grand Archive, there was a chamber that had not been opened in 300 years. Inside this chamber was a machine, an ancient beacon that had been given to them by the Galactic Assembly long ago. The Assembly had told them that this beacon was for emergencies only, that it would send a message across the stars, asking for help from anyone who could hear it. They had never used it. They had never needed to. They had believed that they never would. Activated the beacon with trembling hands. The message was simple. It was desperate. It was the last hope of a dying people. To any who hear this, we are the of Prime, we are dying. The Dominion has invaded our world, they are killing us. They are taking our children, we have no weapons, we have no military, we cannot fight. We can only ask. We can only beg, please, if there is anyone out there who can help us, please come, please save us, please. The message flew across the stars at faster than light speed. It passed dead worlds and empty systems. It passed species who heard it and turned away because they were afraid. It passed the great powers of the galaxy who heard it and did nothing because they were too strong to challenge. And then it reached a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. It reached Earth. Commander Park was having a bad day. The coffee machine in the Sol Orbital Command Center was broken again. The night shift had left their reports unfinished, and she had not slept in 20 hours. She was sitting at her desk, rubbing her tired eyes when the transmission came through. At first she thought it was a mistake, a glitch in the system. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and they were still learning how the alien communication networks worked. But then she read the translation. And then she read it again. And then she set down her coffee cup with a hand that did not shake, even though her heart was pounding. "Lieutenant," she said calmly, "get me Admiral now." Admiral was 63 years old. He had served in the military for 40 years. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars, and he had led the defense of the outer colonies against pirates and raiders for a decade after. He had seen death. He had caused death. He had learned that violence was sometimes necessary to protect the innocent. When he read the transmission, his face did not change, but his hands curled into fists. "How far away is this prime?" he asked. 14 hours at maximum hyperspace speed, sir," his aide replied. "And the fleet?" "Intelligence estimates over 300 vessels in the system. We have 12 dreadnoughts available, sir, 40 cruisers, 200 fighters. We would be outnumbered badly." Was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the risks. He thought about the cost. He thought about the young men and women who would die if he gave the order. He thought about the politicians who would question his decision. He thought about all the reasons why he should say no. Then he thought about the children, screaming, dying, calling for help that might never come. "Wake the fleet," he said. "All of it, every ship, every soldier, every pilot who can fly." "Sir, the Assembly has not authorized." "I do not need their authorization." His voice was hard as iron. "Someone is hurting children. Someone is asking for help. We are going to answer." Within 6 hours, the United Earth Defense Force had mobilized. Ships launched from orbital stations around Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. Soldiers kissed their families goodbye and boarded transport vessels. Pilots ran final checks on their fighters and whispered prayers to whatever gods they believed in. At the head of the fleet was the flagship Fury of Terra, the largest warship humanity had ever built. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a weapon designed for one purpose: to destroy anything that threatened humanity and those under humanity's protection. Admiral stood on the bridge, watching the stars stretch into lines as the fleet entered hyperspace. Beside him, his tactical officer was reviewing the data on the Dominion. "Sir," she said quietly, "they have never lost a war. They have conquered over 1,000 worlds. Their technology is more advanced than ours. Their numbers are greater. The odds are not in our favor." Did not look away from the stars. "The odds are never in our favor, Commander," he said. "We are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived ice ages. We survived predators. We survived plagues. We survived each other. We are still here." He turned to face his crew, the hundreds of men and women who had volunteered to fly into almost certain death to save people they had never met. "The called for help," he said, "and we answered. That is who we are. That is what we do. The strong protect the weak, not because it is easy, but because it is right." The fleet flew on through the darkness between stars. Help was coming. 3 days had passed since Elder activated the beacon. 3 days of hiding. 3 days of watching friends die. 3 days of silence from the stars. Had stopped hopping. Hope was a luxury that the dying could not afford. Now there was only survival, finding food, finding water, keeping the children quiet when patrols passed overhead, counting the survivors and trying not to think about how few there were. The hiding place was a collapsed section of the Grand Archive. Once, this building had held the collected wisdom of the civilization. Now it was rubble, but rubble made good shelter, and they had already searched this area. They would not return soon. 47 huddled in the darkness. 20 of them were children. They did not cry anymore. They had learned that crying brought the... So they sat in silence, their blue skin dim, their large eyes empty. Sat apart from the others, watching the small communication device that was linked to the beacon. It had not made a sound since the message was sent. No one had answered. No one was coming. The galaxy had heard the scream, and the galaxy had turned away. Then the device beeped. Grabbed it so fast that several survivors looked up in alarm. The The screen showed a simple message in a language the translator could barely understand. Survivors, this is Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. We are entering your system now. Hold on, help is here. Read the message 5 times, then started to cry. What is it? A young named Sorrel asked. Elder, what does it say? Someone answered, whispered, someone is coming. Above Prime, the fleet commander was having a productive day. The invasion was nearly complete. Resistance had been crushed. The slaves were being loaded onto transport ships. Soon, he would return to Prime as a hero, bringing thousands of new workers for the Empire. Then his sensor officer screamed. Commander, hyperspace signatures, multiple contacts. The commander turned to the tactical display, annoyed. Probably a merchant convoy wandering into the wrong system. He would destroy them and add their cargo to his spoils. Then he saw the size of the signatures, and he saw how many there were. 12 massive contacts, 40 medium contacts, over 200 small contacts, all of them moving fast, all of them heading directly for his fleet. Identify them, he ordered. Unknown configuration, Commander. We have no record of these ship designs. They are broadcasting a signal. Let me hear it. The bridge speakers crackled, and then a voice spoke, a voice that was calm, steady, and absolutely without fear. Vessels, this is Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force. You have attacked a civilian population that sent a distress call. Under Earth's protection doctrine, that makes them our responsibility. You have one chance to withdraw from this system. Take it. The commander stared at the display. Then he laughed. It was a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. Unknown fleet, you are outnumbered 20-1. Your species is not registered in our databases. You are clearly primitive and do not understand what you are facing. We are the Dominion. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have never been defeated. He leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering with amusement. Withdraw now, or we will destroy you, and then we will find and we will burn it to ash. There was a pause, then the human voice returned. You were warned. The first shot came from the Fury of Terra. It was not a warning shot. It was not a ranging shot. It was a kill shot, a concentrated beam of energy that crossed the distance between the two fleets in less than a second and struck the command carrier directly in its main reactor. The explosion lit up the sky above Prime like a second sun. In the ruins of the Grand Archive, and the other survivors rushed to the collapsed wall that served as their window. They looked up and saw fire in the heavens. They saw the ships burning. They saw the strange angular vessels of the newcomers diving into the enemy formation with a speed that seemed impossible. What are they? Sorrel whispered. A young technician was working frantically on a damaged data terminal, trying to access the galactic database. After a moment, she found what she was looking for. Her bioluminescence flickered wildly, the equivalent of turning pale with shock. Humans, she said. They are called humans. They are from a world called Earth. Where is Earth? Far away, very far away, it is. It is listed as a Class 12. Felt something cold run down spine. What does that mean? The technician read from the screen, her voice shaking. Classification indicates a planet with extreme conditions hostile to life. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic atmosphere components, dangerous predators at every level of the food chain, frequent natural disasters, unstable tectonic activity. She looked up with wide eyes. They evolved on a world that was trying to kill them. Every day, for millions of years, they are built for violence, Elder. Fighting is how they survived. Above them, the battle continued. They outnumbered the humans 20-1. They had more ships. They had more guns. They had centuries of experience conquering other species. None of it mattered. The humans did not fight like any species they had ever encountered. They did not form neat lines. They did not follow predictable patterns. They dove into the formation like wolves attacking a herd, targeting weak points, exploiting openings, working together with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. And they were fast, so fast. Gunners could not track the human fighters. Captains could not predict where the human cruisers would strike next. The humans moved with a speed and aggression that should have been suicide, and somehow they survived. Lieutenant Han was leading Red Squadron through the heart of the fleet. Her fighter was a small craft, barely 20 meters long, but it carried enough firepower to destroy ships 10 times its size, and knew how to use every weapon it had. Red 3, watch your 6, she called out. Red 7, target that cruiser's engine section. Red 2, with me. Her wingman pulled his fighter alongside hers. What's the plan, Lieutenant? Smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had spotted wounded prey. See that big ship in the center, the one with all the guns? The one that looks like it could eat our entire squadron for breakfast. That's the one. We're going inside it. Was quiet for a moment. Inside it. Inside it. The hangar bay is open. They're launching more fighters. We go in, plant explosives on the reactor and get out before it blows. That's insane. That's why it's going to work. They won't expect it. Red Squadron dove toward the massive battleship. Point defense turrets filled the space around them with plasma fire. Twisted and rolled, her hands moving faster than thought, her body reacting on instinct alone. 2 of her pilots died in the approach, then 3 more, but the rest made it through. They flew into the hangar bay at full speed. Inside, chaos erupted. Soldiers scattered as human fighters screamed through the corridors of their own ship, fired at everything that moved while raced toward the reactor core. He had 30 seconds to plant the charges and get out. He made it in 20. Charges set, he shouted. Go, go, go. Red Squadron fled the battleship just as the explosives detonated. The reactor went critical. The ship tore itself apart from the inside, a chain reaction of destruction that spread through its entire structure. In the ruins below, the survivors watched the massive vessel explode. For the first time in weeks, they felt something they had forgotten. They felt hope. On the bridge of the Fury of Terra, Admiral watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The battle was turning. The formation was breaking apart. They had not expected resistance. They had not expected anyone to answer this call, and they certainly had not expected the answer to come with such fury. Commander said, "Open a channel to the command frequency. I want them to hear this." Nodded. Channel open, sir. Straightened his uniform. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the calm. Dominion, you attacked innocent people. You killed children. You thought no one would stop you. You were wrong. We are humans. We are, and we do not forgive. He paused. Run while you still can. They did not run. They fought hard, but it was not enough. By the end of the day, the fleet above Prime was destroyed. Every ship, every soldier, every last trace of their invasion force. And in the ruins of the Grand Archive, Elder looked up at the stars with tears streaming down his glowing face. Help had come. The had answered. The battle above Prime was over, but the war had just begun. Admiral stood in the medical bay of the Fury of Terra, looking at the rows of injured soldiers. Some would live, some would not. All of them had volunteered to come here, to fight and die for people they had never met. He felt the weight of their sacrifice like a stone on his chest. Admiral, Commander appeared at his side. The ground teams have secured the capital. We have found over 50,000 survivors in the ruins. Medical ships are landing now. And the ones on the ground surrendered when they saw their fleet destroyed. Most of them. A few tried to fight. They did not last long. Nodded slowly. Good. What about the rest of the Dominion? Handed him a data tablet. Her face was grim. Intelligence reports that they have over 100 colonies across this sector. They have enslaved dozens of species, their military numbers in the millions, and, she hesitated. Say it, Commander. The High Command has been informed of what happened here. They are furious. They are calling this an act of war against the entire Dominion. Looked at the tablet. He saw maps of territory. He saw numbers, ships, soldiers, weapons. The Dominion was vast, powerful, far stronger than Earth on paper. Good, he said. Blinked, sir. If they want a war, we will give them a war. His voice was quiet, but there was something dangerous in it. They have been hurting innocent people for centuries. It stops now, today. We will hunt them across every star system. We will free every slave. We will burn every military base. And we will not stop until they can never hurt anyone again. He turned to face her directly. Send a message to Earth. Tell them what we have found. Tell them what they have done. And tell them that we are not coming home until this is finished. On Prime, the High Command was in chaos. 7 members sat around a great table made from the bones of conquered species. They had ruled the Dominion for generations. They had never known fear. They had never needed to. Their empire was vast, their military unbeatable, their dominance absolute. Until today. 300 ships, one of them screamed. We lost 300 ships to these primitives. How is this possible? Their technology is not superior to ours, another said, studying the data from the battle. Their ships are slower. Their weapons are weaker. They should have been destroyed in minutes. But they were not destroyed. They won. Explain that. The room fell silent. No one could explain it. The numbers did not make sense. The tactics did not make sense. Nothing about the humans made sense. Finally, the eldest member of the High Command spoke. His name was Or, and he had led the Dominion to countless victories over his long life. But today, his voice was troubled. I have studied the recordings from the battle, he said slowly. I have analyzed their movements, their patterns, their behavior. He paused. These humans, they do not fight like any species we have ever encountered. What do you mean? Most species fight to survive. They are careful, they protect themselves, they retreat when the odds turn against them. It is logical, it is sensible. Or's compound eyes were dark. The humans do not do this. They charge into danger. They take risks that should kill them. They sacrifice themselves for each other without hesitation. He looked around the table. They fight like they do not fear death, and that makes them more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced. The youngest member of the High Command slammed his claw against the table. Then we will teach them to fear. We will send the entire fleet. We will crush them. With what fleet? Or asked quietly. They destroyed 300 ships with 60. Our total military numbers less than 5,000 vessels, if they continue fighting at this rate. He did not need to finish the sentence. The math was clear. The humans were outnumbered and fighting far from home, and they were winning anyway. There is another option, one of the commanders said carefully. There, Earth. Our intelligence suggests that most of their military is now in our territory, if we send a strike force to their planet. Or considered this. It was a cowardly tactic, attacking civilians, striking at the enemy's home while their warriors were away. But they had never cared about honor. They cared about victory. Do it, he said. Assemble a stealth fleet, find this Earth, destroy it. Without there, the humans will have nothing to fight for. The preparations began immediately. Meanwhile, the human fleet moved deeper into territory. Admiral had split his forces into 3 groups. One group stayed at Prime to protect the survivors. One group attacked military installations, and one group, the main fleet, headed for the slave colonies. The first colony they reached was called 4. It was a mining world where thousands of enslaved species worked in deep underground tunnels, extracting rare metals for the Dominion. The conditions were brutal. The workers were beaten. The dead were left where they fell. When the human ships appeared in orbit, the garrison commander laughed. He had 2,000 soldiers and heavy fortifications. These humans thought they could take his position with a few hundred Marines. Lieutenant Han was the first one out of the. She hit the ground running, her rifle already firing. The soldiers were large and armored but was fast, and she was angry. She had seen the images from Prime. She had seen what they did to children, and she had no mercy left in her heart. "Push forward," she shouted. "Don't give them time to organize." The human Marines moved through the base like a storm. They were smaller than their enemies. They were fewer in number, but they were relentless. When one fell, another took their place. When a position seemed impossible to take, they found a way to take it anyway. Sergeant fought beside, his face grim and determined. He had been a farmer's son before joining the military. He had never imagined he would be fighting aliens on a distant world. But when he thought about the slaves in those tunnels, people suffering, people dying, people waiting for someone to save them, he found the strength to keep going. He called out, "The main gate is open, we can get to the tunnels." "Then let's go." They fought their way underground. The tunnels were dark and narrow, filled with the smell of sweat and blood and fear. Guards tried to stop them. The guards failed. And then the humans reached the slave pens. Thousands of beings from dozens of species looked up with empty eyes. They had stopped hopping long ago. They had accepted that no one was coming to save them, that they would work until they died, and then their children would take their place. And now there were strange creatures standing at the entrance to their prison. Small creatures, soft creatures, creatures who were covered in blood and breathing hard, but whose eyes burned with fierce determination. Lowered her rifle. She looked at the slaves, at the wounds on their bodies, at the fear in their eyes, at the chains around their ankles. She felt her heart break. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're here to help, you're free now." The slaves did not understand at first. Freedom was a word they had forgotten. But then the humans started breaking their chains, started helping them stand, started carrying the ones who could not walk. One of the slaves, an old male from a species did not recognize, grabbed her arm. His grip was weak, but his eyes were full of tears. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you come? You do not know us, you owe us nothing. Why would you risk your lives for strangers?" Thought about the question. She thought about her home on Earth. She thought about her family. She thought about all the reasons she had joined the military, to protect people, to make a difference, to stand up against those who would hurt the innocent. "Because someone had to," she said finally, "and we were the ones who could." The old slave stared at her for a long moment. Then he bowed his head and wept. Colony by colony, the humans liberated the slaves. World by world, they pushed deeper into enemy territory. The Dominion had never faced anything like this. They had conquered species that surrendered. They had crushed species that resisted. But they had never fought a species that simply refused to stop coming. On Earth, Dr. Sora watched the news reports with a mixture of pride and fear. Her father was out there, leading the fleet, fighting an enemy that outnumbered him 100-1. Every day, she wondered if this would be the day she received the message telling her he was gone. She was scheduled to speak at the United Nations today. There were protests outside, people demanding to know why Earth was involved in a distant war, why human soldiers were dying for aliens they had never met. She understood their fears. She shared some of them. But she also believed in what her father was doing. She walked to the podium and looked out at the assembled delegates, representatives from every nation on Earth, waiting to hear her speak. "I know many of you are afraid," she began. "I know many of you are angry. You want to know why we are fighting this war, why we are sacrificing our sons and daughters for strangers on the other side of the galaxy." She paused. "Let me tell you a story. When I was a child, my father taught me something. He said that the measure of a person is not how they treat their friends. It is how they treat those who cannot give them anything in return. She looked at the crowd. They could not give us anything. They had no resources we needed, no technology we wanted, no strategic value. They were just people, innocent people, dying people, and they called for help. Her voice grew stronger. We could have ignored them. We could have said it was not our problem. We could have let them die. She shook her head. But that is not who we are. That is not what humanity stands for. We protect the weak because it is right. We fight for the innocent because someone has to, and we do not abandon those who ask for our help. She lifted her chin. My father is out there right now, fighting for people he has never met, and I am proud of him. I am proud of every human who answered the call, because they are showing the galaxy what humanity truly is. The room was silent. Then slowly, the applause began. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Prime. 3 months of constant fighting. 3 months of liberation. 3 months of blood. The galaxy watched in disbelief as the humans tore through the Dominion like fire through dry wood. Colony after colony fell. Fleet after fleet was destroyed. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found themselves free, their chains broken by strange small creatures from a distant world. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Fury of Terra, studying the tactical map. His hair had turned grayer in these 3 months. His face had grown thinner. He slept only a few hours each night, and those hours were filled with dreams of burning ships and dying soldiers. But he did not stop. He could not stop, not while they still held slaves, not while innocent people still suffered. Admiral, Commander said, approaching with a data tablet. We have received new intelligence from the liberated colonies. They are pulling back their remaining forces to defend their core systems. Their military has been reduced to less than 1,000 ships. Nodded slowly. 3 months ago they had 5,000 ships. Now they had less than 1,000. It was not a victory yet, but it was progress. Casualties, he asked. Hesitated. This was the part she hated. We have lost 8 dreadnoughts, sir, 22 cruisers, 117 fighters, she swallowed. 14,000 dead, 8,000 wounded. 14,000. Each number was a person, a son, a daughter, a friend, someone who had left Earth to fight for strangers and would never come home. And the casualties, estimated at over 200,000 military personnel, plus the loss of their ships and infrastructure. Their economy is collapsing. Their subject species are revolting. The Dominion is falling apart. Looked at the map again. The Prime glowed red at the center of their remaining territory. That was where this would end. That was where the war would be won or lost. Prepare the fleet, he said. We move on Prime in 48 hours. But they had plans of their own. Deep in the cold space between stars, a fleet of 50 vessels moved silently through the void. They were stealth ships, dark, quiet, invisible to most sensors. They carried no slaves, no cargo, no colonists. They carried only soldiers and weapons. Their destination was Earth. Commander or led the stealth fleet. He was young for an officer, but he had earned his position through cunning and brutality. The High Command had given him a simple mission: reach Earth, destroy everything, and break the humans' will to fight. Status report, he demanded. We will reach the Sol system in 6 hours, Commander. Our intelligence indicates that most of the human military is engaged in our territory. There has only minimal defenses. Or's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. This was the way. Strike at the weak point. Destroy what your enemy loves. Make them suffer so badly that they lose the will to resist. He had studied the humans during the past 3 months. He had watched recordings of their battles. He had read reports from survivors. He knew they were dangerous. He knew they were relentless, but he also knew they had a weakness. They cared too much. They formed attachments. They loved their families. They mourned their dead. If he destroyed their world, killed their children, burned their cities, shattered their home, they would crumble. They would weep and rage and eventually surrender. Or so he believed. On Earth, Colonel was having a quiet day at Luna Base. The base was technically a museum now. It housed the old defense systems from humanity's darker days, the weapons that had been built during the Great Wars, when humans had feared each other more than the stars. Orbital, planetary defense lasers, strategic missiles with warheads that could crack continents. Most of these weapons had been decommissioned decades ago. They were relics of a violent past that humanity had tried to leave behind. His job was to maintain them, study them, and make sure they never needed to be used again. Then the alarm started screaming. "Colonel," Sergeant IM ran into the command center, his face pale. "We have contacts, 50 unknown vessels entering the outer system." Was at the sensor station in seconds. She saw the contacts on the screen, dark shapes moving fast, heading directly for Earth. Her blood went cold. Configuration. "Colonel, stealth ships. They must have slipped past our early warning network." His mind raced. Most of Earth's fleet was on the other side of the galaxy. The planetary defense ships that remained were scattered across the system. They could never assemble in time. Earth was practically defenseless. Unless... She turned to look at the old weapons, the relics, the museum pieces, the instruments of destruction that humanity had built when they were still learning how terrible they could be. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "how long until those ships reach Earth?" "At their current speed, 4 hours." "And how long to bring the old defense grid online?" Stared at her. "Colonel, those systems haven't been fired in 80 years. We don't even know if they still work." "How long?" He swallowed. 3 hours maybe, if nothing goes wrong." "Then nothing goes wrong." Grab the emergency communication system. "All hands, this is Colonel. We have incoming hostiles. I am authorizing Protocol 0. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Everyone to their stations. We have work to do." The next 3 hours were the longest of his life. Technicians worked frantically to restore systems that had been dormant for decades. Engineers crawled through maintenance tunnels, replacing damaged components, bypassing failed circuits, bringing ancient weapons back to life. Coordinated the efforts, his voice steady even as his hands shook. And watched the fleet grow closer on the sensors. 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Colonel shouted, "Grid is online, all systems show green." Looked at the tactical display. The ships were entering weapons range. In minutes, they would be close enough to attack Earth directly. "Lock targets," she ordered, "all weapons." Across the solar system, the old defense grid came alive. Orbital that had once threatened to destroy human cities now turned their barrels toward alien invaders. Planetary defense lasers that had been built to shoot down missiles now targeted alien warships. Strategic platforms that had been designed for human wars now prepared to fight a battle that would determine humanity's survival. "Targets locked, Colonel." Took a deep breath. She thought about the people on Earth below, the children playing in parks, the families eating dinner together, the millions of lives that depended on what happened in the next few seconds. "Fire." The sky lit up. Rounds crossed the void at incredible speeds, punching through armor like paper. Defense lasers swept across the enemy formation, cutting ships in half. Missiles streaked toward their targets, detonating with enough force to vaporize anything nearby. Commander Orr had expected an easy victory. He had expected to find a defenseless world, ripe for destruction. Instead, he found himself flying into a wall of fire unlike anything he had ever seen. "What is this?" he screamed. "Where are these weapons coming from?" "Unknown, Commander. Our sensors show weapons platforms across the entire system. They are everywhere." Or watched his fleet die around him. Ship after ship exploded. Soldiers he had trained and fought beside were vaporized in seconds. His grand plan, his certain victory, was turning into a massacre. He tried to retreat. He ordered his remaining ships to fall back, to escape, to survive. It was too late. The last stealth ship was destroyed 43 minutes after the battle began. Not a single enemy vessel reached Earth. Not a single human civilian was harmed. On Luna Base, Colonel sat down heavily in her chair. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally fatting. Around her, the control room erupted in cheers. Technicians hugged each other. Soldiers wept with relief. Approached her, his eyes wet. "We did it, Colonel, we stopped them." Nodded slowly. "Yes, we did." She looked at the display, at the debris field that had once been 50 enemy warships. Somewhere out there, Admiral was still fighting. His fleet was still hunting across the stars. And now, the enemy's desperate gamble had failed. "Send a message to the Admiral," she said. "Tell him Earth is safe. Tell him we're still here." She smiled grimly. "And tell him it's time to finish this." On Prime, the High Command received the news of the failed attack in stunned silence. 50 ships, their best stealth fleet, gone in less than an hour. The humans should have been defenseless, but it had turned into a death trap. How, or whispered, how did they know we were coming? How did they have those weapons ready? No one had an answer. And then at the edge of their system, sensor stations began detecting new contacts. Many contacts, moving fast, heading straight for Prime. The human fleet had arrived. Admiral's face appeared on every screen in the capital. His voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. No mercy, no hesitation. "You tried to attack our home," he said. "You failed. We showed you mercy at Prime. We gave you chances to surrender. You answered by trying to murder our families." His eyes were hard as iron. "There will be no more mercy. There will be no more chances. Surrender now unconditionally, or we will end this the hard way." The High Command looked at each other. They looked at their depleted fleet. They looked at the human dreadnoughts filling their sky. For the first time in their species' history, they had no options left. The High Command chamber had stood for 3,000 years. Its walls were decorated with trophies from 100 conquered worlds. Its floors were made from the polished bones of defeated enemies. It was a monument to power, to dominance, to the belief that the strong had every right to take from the weak. Now it was filled with fear. The 7 members of the High Command sat around their great table, but they no longer looked like rulers. They looked like what they truly were: old, tired creatures who had finally met something they could not defeat. Outside their windows, the sky was filled with human ships. The Fury of Terra hung directly above the capital city, its weapons pointed down at the heart of civilization. Smaller vessels patrolled the skies, shooting down any ship that tried to flee. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The hunters had become the hunted. "We must surrender," Orr said finally. His voice was heavy with defeat. "There is no other choice. If we fight, they will destroy us completely. Our species will end today." "Surrender," the youngest commander slammed his claw against the table. We have never surrendered to anyone." "Then we will be the first species to be entirely destroyed by humans." Orr's compound eyes were dull. "Is your pride worth the lives of every child, every female, every elder? Is it worth the complete extinction of our kind?" The young commander had no answer. "Send the message," Orr ordered. "Tell them we accept their terms, unconditional surrender." The transmission was sent. Minutes later, Admiral's response came through. "Your surrender is accepted. You will immediately release all slaves. You will dismantle all military vessels and weapons. You will pay reparations to every species you have harmed. You will submit to monitoring to ensure you never rebuild your military capability. Violate any of these terms and we will return." There was a pause. "But know this. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to stop you from hurting others. If you can learn to live in peace, if you can become better than what you were, then you have a future. Your children can grow up in a galaxy where they don't have to be afraid." or listened to these words with something he had never felt before: shame. For 3,000 years, the had believed that strength meant domination, that power meant control, that the only way to survive was to crush anyone who might be a threat. And now, these humans, these small, soft creatures from a deadly world, were showing them a different kind of strength. The strength to win a war and then offer peace. 1 year later, Elder stood in the rebuilt Grand Archive of Prime. The building was not exactly as it had been before. The had decided to incorporate human architectural elements into the design: stronger foundations, reinforced walls, emergency shelters hidden throughout the structure. It was a reminder of what had happened, a promise that they would be ready if darkness ever came again. But the gardens were the same, the flowers still bloomed, the fountains still sang, and children, so many children, played in the sunshine, their blue skin glowing with health and happiness. Watched them with tears in eyes that had seen too much death. "You're thinking about the ones we lost." Turned, Admiral stood nearby, dressed in civilian clothes for the first time since had known him. He looked older than he had a year ago, more tired, but there was peace in his eyes that had not been there before. "Yes," admitted, "so many died. Sometimes I wonder if we could have done something different, called for help sooner, fought harder." "You did everything you could," walked over to stand beside the elder. "They were a force of nature. No one could have stopped them alone. But you stopped them, your people, your soldiers. You came when no one else would." Was quiet for a moment. "We did what anyone should do. We heard a cry for help and we answered." But why? Had asked this question many times over the past year. Each time the answer seemed different. Each time understood it a little more. You lost 14,000 soldiers, 14,000 of your children, for strangers, for people who could give you nothing in return. Why would you do that? Looked at the children playing in the garden. One of them had found a flower and was showing it to her friends, her bioluminescence flickering with delight. "Because that's what strength is for," he said simply. "On Earth we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We had the power to help you. We had ships. We had weapons. We had soldiers who were willing to fight, and you needed help." He turned to face directly. "What kind of people would we be if we turned away? What would our power mean if we only used it for ourselves? We would be no better than the—" Considered this. They had never thought of strength that way. They had always seen strength as something dangerous, something to be feared. But the humans had shown them that strength could also protect, could heal, could save. "The galaxy is different now," said softly. "Because of what you did. Species that lived in fear for centuries are free. The Dominion is gone, and everyone knows that there is someone out there who will answer when the helpless call." "That's the idea," smiled slightly. "We hope we won't need to fight again. We hope the galaxy has learned that attacking innocent people has consequences, but if someone calls for help, you will answer." "We will always answer." A door opened, and Dr. Sora walked into the garden. She had been appointed as Earth's first ambassador to and she had spent the past year helping rebuild their civilization. She was good at it. She had her father's determination and her own gift for understanding others. "Father," she said, hugging him, "I didn't know you were visiting. I wanted to see how things were going." He looked around at the archive, at the gardens, at the children. "It seems like you've been busy." "We've made progress," Sora smiled at. "They are resilient. They've rebuilt faster than anyone expected." "We had help," said. "We had friends." The three of them walked through the garden together, past the flowers and fountains, past the playing children, past the monuments that had been built to honor those who fell in the war. Human names were carved alongside names. Soldiers who had given their lives to save a people they had never met. "What happens now?" asked. "Now we move forward," Sora said. "Earth is working with the other species to build a new alliance, a way for everyone to help each other, so that the next time someone calls for help, they won't have to wait for a response." And they're changing, slowly. It's not easy for them to unlearn 3,000 years of violence, but they're trying. The younger generation especially. They want to be something different than what their parents were. Nodded slowly. They had every reason to hate the forever. They had lost so much, so many dead, so many wounds that would never fully heal, but hatred was exhausting, and the humans had shown that there were better ways to use strength than for revenge. We have decided to offer the gift, said quietly. Sora and looked surprised. What kind of gift? Seeds from our gardens, and teachers to show them how to grow things instead of destroying them. Bioluminescence flickered with something like hope. If they can learn to create beauty, perhaps they will lose the desire to destroy it. Put his hand on shoulder. It was a human gesture but had learned what it meant. Respect, support, friendship. That's very brave of you, Elder. I learned it from watching your people. Looked up at the human admiral with ancient, wise eyes. You came to save us with fury, but you stayed to help us with kindness. That is the true strength you showed us, not just the power to destroy, but the courage to heal. Above them, the sky was clear and blue. Somewhere up there, human ships still patrolled the space lanes, keeping watch, keeping peace. And throughout the galaxy, species that had once lived in fear now looked to the stars with hope. They knew that if darkness came again, there was a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system where people believed in protecting the weak, where children were taught that strength was meant for helping others, where soldiers were willing to cross the galaxy to answer a stranger's cry for help. The had called for help. The had answered with fury that shook the stars. And the galaxy would never forget. In the garden of the Grand Archive, a child picked a flower and offered it to Admiral. Her small blue hand trembled slightly, but her eyes were bright with joy. "Thank you," she said in careful, practiced human words. "Thank you for saving us." Knelt down to accept the flower. For a moment, the warrior who had destroyed fleets and conquered empires looked like nothing more than a tired old man who was very far from home. "You're welcome," he said softly. "You're very welcome." The flower was small and delicate, its petals a shade of purple that did not exist on Earth. Held it carefully, like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Because in many ways it was. It was proof that they had done the right thing, that the sacrifices had meant something, that the 14,000 who had died had not died in vain. It was hope, growing in a garden that had once been ashes. It was the future, reaching out with small hands. It was everything.